Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Lee Helms. I am the director for our data and AI solution specialists in the East. And last year, we ran several webinars on OpenAI. We did what is OpenAI, we did some of the history, we did technical overviews. But what we found over the course of the year, when I was meeting with several customers and our executives were meeting with your executives, one of the topics that kept coming up again and again was, how do I prepare my organization for this AI shift? Thinking about organization, preparation, culture, and wanting to put all those components together so that it's more than just the technical pieces, but it is, how do I ready my organization to execute against this successfully? Lantern, one of our partners, has a keen understanding of business strategy of rolling out technical solutions across the board, but especially in the AI space. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jeff. We approached Lantern to help build this for us because we realized that this was a gap that we had in the training that we were pushing out to everybody. Lantern built this content that is not going to be technical. It is going to be how you ready and prepare your organization to adopt this new technology. So with that, Jeff, pass it over to you.
Thank you, Lee. Really appreciate it. Hey guys, I'm Jeff Johnston, one of the principals here at Lantern. I've been with Lantern and the company that was a part of Lantern, Artist Consulting, for 16 years. And so I've been doing this a really long time. And we're looking forward to today. Really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to be a part of this. And as Lee mentioned, we're going to provide this content focused on AI from strategy all the way through deployment, and really hopefully give you a practical guide to enabling AI throughout your organization. And so one of the things we wanted to do is quickly walk through the agenda. First thing we're going to talk about is walk through how AI is the key to digital leadership. And we're going to give you a peek into what successful AI initiatives look like. We'll kind of level set next on what AI is. There's been a lot of change in the AI space recently. And so we want to make sure everybody's on the same page when it comes to how we're thinking of AI. Then we'll dive into some critical success factors. Everything from how do I identify use cases and create a roadmap for our AI needs across the organization, to how do we get the organization ready from a technology and talent and culture perspective. And then building on our data estate, making sure it is ready to help enable us to deliver on these AI use cases. And finally, before we get to Q&A, we'll close out with making sure we walk through some very key information around security, privacy, and governance to hopefully enable you to be successful. And then finally, we'll bring it to a close with the Q&A session. As we dive in, I think now is we're going to launch our first poll question to keep everyone engaged and throughout this webinar. But want to understand, how would you rate your current familiarity with AI? And so we'll get that poll launched, and hopefully everybody can see that. Perfect. I'm getting some good responses coming in. Excellent. So it looks like everybody kind of fits. We got novice, beginner, intermediate, all with the majority of the votes, about 39% coming in on the intermediate side. So that's great. We're looking forward to seeing where the discussion goes here. So as we get into this next section, we want to understand why AI is a key to digital leadership, and then talk about what successful AI initiatives look like. And so with this, I want to present this as a framework, because when you think about successful AI initiatives, you want to understand before you get started what the outcome looks like. And every successful use case typically has an identified challenge. It has an outcome that you're attempting to achieve, typically a business outcome that you're trying to achieve, and then what that impact has had on the business, or expected to have on the business in terms of maybe some key measurables or key KPIs. And so we've got a couple of real world examples of companies that have been successful from an AI perspective along a couple of different spectrums or a couple of different dimensions. And so I'm going to bring in Paul Huggins, our AI practice lead, to walk you through some of these use cases.
Thanks, Jeff. There's two that we're going to touch on. This first one is around Unify Aviation. Back in 2022, they had a very simple question from the start of how can we improve employee safety and reduce the risk of airline incidents? And there's a lot to unpack in that. That's a very broad question. So let me give you a quick example of what they were trying to solve for. So it's a hot summer day back in Atlanta. The airport is flying planes all over the place. It's at capacity. At one of the terminals, an unattended baggage cart becomes loose, starts rolling, and crashes into an airplane. Not only does this cause millions of dollars in damage, but it also is scheduling conflicts for the passengers and it hurts the reputation of the service company itself. So, what we're really talking about here in this particular use case is a needle in a haystack. Over 1 million flights, there's less than 100 of these, both employee or airline incidents. So, really, we get down to how do we approach this? How do we solve this? What do we have to look out for? The first piece of this was a predictive piece. And I say it's not like Minority Report, if you're familiar with that movie, where someone's going to drop in with a ladder and a rope and stop everything from happening. What this is really designed to do is generate risk scores given a particular area based on the likelihood of an event like this happening in this melting pot of factors, everything from weather to airline metrics to compliance to HR data to everything in between. The second piece of this was really designed around being prescriptive. So we have these predictive models out there. How can we then prescribe actions that the unified team can take to reduce the risk of these types of incidents? And there are three main things that really made Unify successful through this. One was they had their data platform in order. They had a full list of must and nice to have ideas and data points, everything from mentioned flight data, weather, everything in between all of that. They also knew what actions that they could actually take. They love the prescriptive piece, but they wanted to know I can send somebody here or I can do X, Y, Z. Those steps that they could take were definable. And then the third one is really they had a business champion from the inside who was pushing the use of AI through their organization, really driving that point home so that everybody could be adopted into that mindset. And I think altogether for this unified solution, it took a team of roughly 2 to 3 people, 6 months or so from start to finish to develop this. And it didn't cost them a fortune. And what they're seeing through all this is not only a decrease in incidents over the last 2 years, but also a much healthier operation across the whole organization. That's kind of one example of how safety is being changed using AI. And then the second one that we're going to look at is really transforming an industry as a whole. So we worked with a leading greeting card designer to really pick out and help people design that perfect card. So when you go to a grocery store or a store to pick up one of these, do you get it at random? Do you have a style or a theme in mind that you want to go with? And in difficult times, do you know what to say? Do you need help saying some of those things? Or if you're like my sister and I, we used to get each other cards in Spanish or different languages just to have fun and be different in that regard. So how AI is being used here is really designed around engaging with customers in a natural conversation that picks up on the nuances and preferences of that individual and helps them create and craft a perfect card package using both textual and image AI to marry those two together to give them a really good and appropriate fitting card for what they're going through right now. And one of the biggest keys that we had to work on here, one of the big keys for success through all this, was we're talking about highly technical ideas with highly creative teams. And the blend of the business with these tools is really what drove success here in this one. We couldn't have done this without their editors, creatives, marketing teams, everyone on their side bringing that knowledge to the table and helping us learn that when we see a picture of a night sky with stars up in the clouds and a lonesome bench in a grass field, what does that mean to us versus the person next to us versus the person on this call? How do we get these systems to think like that? And that was only possible through the collaboration of the business and the technical teams really driving that. And as part of this one in particular, only took about 2 months to build. It took a small team of 4 to 6 people, and then cost less than six figures for all that. So I really wanted to highlight two of those use cases, and then I'll pass it back off to Jeff to go through the rest.
Perfect. Thank you, Paul. The idea of all these different use cases is that it can be valuable across many different areas of your business, whether it's predictive marketing or intelligent document automation, or even natural language processing to tag items to reduce manual effort, even helping improve improve the performance of race cars. And I think the idea here is that AI is not just a chatbot. It can be valuable in many different applications across the enterprise in many different functional areas of your business. As we tie back to what this agenda item is all about, and that is helping drive digital leadership and making the case for digital leadership across the enterprise. If you're not familiar with the term digital leadership, this refers to a modern approach to leadership that emphasizes strategic use of digital technologies to help drive transformation and innovation. It's from a book called Future Ready. And it was based on a lot of research that MIT did and to help categorize companies in these different quadrants. And what emerged was a few of these different quadrants along this 2x2 matrix that has the x-axis with operational efficiency, the y-axis focused on customer experience, and whether or not those companies were more traditional in their mindset or more transformed in their mindset and their practices as well. And so as we click through this, the first kind of category of firms, which is very traditional in both senses from a customer experience and operational efficiency perspective, about 51% of firms fell in this category that was termed silos in spaghetti, where it's characterized by a complex landscape of technologies and processes and not a lot of forward thinking from being AI ready necessarily. The next category is the companies that did provide, they were transformed from a customer experience perspective and provided an integrated experience, especially from a customer interaction and user experience for the applications that they interacted with. And about 20% of firms fell into this category. As we look along the operational efficiency axis, those firms that were transformed from more of a back-end process perspective that were able to transform their operations, this was termed as more of an industrialized category, where they were mature from a data platform perspective, and only about 7% of firms fell into this category. And then finally, those firms that were designated as digital leaders were those that had a number of different characteristics, including they treated data as a strategic asset, and culturally and process-wise, they were AI ready to drive AI throughout the organization. And about 22% of firms fell into this category. And if you notice that we've got this margin characteristic on each of these quadrants as well, that is increased margin as it pertains to that company's peer group. And so companies in this AI ready or digital leader quadrant enjoyed a 19.3% margin advantage over their peers, their industry peers, based on this research. So these digital leaders, to tie back to what we're talking about here, are those firms that are AI ready. So now that we've introduced this concept of digital leadership and the AI ready firm, we want to make sure we take a moment, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but to step back and make sure we're all on the same page as to what AI is. AI is not really new. It's something that's been around for a long time, and it's been an evolution, not a revolution. We hear this a lot. You see this a lot in the news and in trade magazines and so on, that AI is used everywhere, and it's an umbrella term that the media and marketing companies use to characterize a lot of different subdisciplines. And so to practitioners, though, these things are very different. And AI started to emerge in the 50s, where we started to have rules-based algorithms. Then in the 90s, we start to see machine learning algorithms start to gain in popularity, and we start to see the emergence of supervised, unsupervised, and reinforcement learning start to take hold. In the 2010s, when cloud computing started to proliferate and became more prevalent, deep learning algorithms started to accelerate, where we are now able to do a lot of image classification and natural language processing and take advantage of a lot of these deep learning models from that perspective. And then lately, in 2021, we start to see the emergence of generative AI and large language models, where new text and images can be generated based on inputs from the users. And these are all based on transformer models. With that, we wanted to just make sure we kind of baseline on some of that stuff. And we also categorize these in a couple of different categories as well, based on everything that is available out there. And Paul alluded to this in a couple of the use cases that we talked about earlier. And making sure that we want to determine of these broad categories, which is the right one for you based on the business problem that you're trying to solve. Is it just predictive in nature? Where we want to predict the likelihood of events that might occur in the future. Perhaps it's a combination of predictive analytics and prescriptive analytics, where we start to involve those rules-based engines to provide steps to take to mitigate anything bad that might happen, or take steps to improve a particular process or use case. And then finally, generative AI, because it is something that is new that we really haven't seen a lot of before in history, where we have these models that are able to generate new text, new video, new audio, and so on, things that were not necessarily readily available before. But how does AI relate to my business or your business in this case? It's always good to kind of position it and think about it in the frame of the pillars of digital transformation. And when I talk about the pillars of digital transformation, I'm talking about the text in orange, whether it's optimizing operations, engaging customers, empowering employees, or transforming new products. Typically, most businesses can relate to one or more of these different pillars of digital transformation. And perhaps it's starting with optimizing your operations. Walmart does a great job of this, integrating big data analytics to help optimize their supply chain and help them manage their inventory. And so they've used this across the board to help anticipate stock needs and supply chain logistics. Or you could potentially get closer to your customers. Starbucks has done a great job of this with their mobile apps to help engage customers, offer personalized ordering and payment options. And they have a great loyalty program that allows customers to come back and experience more and more and buy more and more of their products that they have. Or we can empower employees. Netflix does a great job of this, helping provide employees customized dashboards that allow them to make data-driven decisions that empowers content creators and marketers and strategists to help understand audience preferences and trends that help them tailor content to those customers and their needs. And then finally, from transforming products. Nike is one of the great examples of this, from going from a running shoe and apparel company to involving digital products to help track performance data. Especially during the pandemic, this was a big push. And they were able to offer these customized products through these digital platforms to allow their customers to even design their own footwear and be able to customize things from that perspective as well. So these are great ways that each of these different companies were able to take advantage of AI and increase that acceleration of digital transformation. So I think this brings us to our next poll question. Which of these AI use case categories holds the most potential for your organization? And so we'll let that poll launch and see which ones people gravitate towards. Perfect. So it looks like optimize operations is in the lead with empower employees. Oh, nope. Now engage customers has jumped up. So perfect. That's pretty cool. But yeah, optimize operations, usually the first place people start. Because it does have a direct correlation to impacting the bottom line. Excellent. So now that we've provided this baseline on digital leadership and AI, let's start to talk about some strategies that we can make this real and discuss approaches to make AI implementation successful in your organization. So one of the ways to do that is to talk about how we might classify these use cases so that we can prioritize them and begin to execute on them. And as you guys just illustrated in that poll, one of the ways that we can do this is through optimizing operations. If you want to start small, and we'll use this horizon-based framework to frame this up. And so one of the great ways to start in categorizing things in Horizon 1 is to help optimize those core business operations. It's a great place to start. And so as you start to move out with Horizon 2 and Horizon 3, Horizon 2 is going to be more about what are different AI use cases I can execute on to help improve my market position or start to transform my business. And then Horizon 3 is all about really transforming your business and getting to some of these aspirational things that you would like to do. Examples of optimizing operations, maybe you just want to optimize transit routes. If you are a supply chain related company, maybe it's scoring market leads, maybe it's forecasting demand or revenue. When we get into Horizon 2, maybe you are involving predictive maintenance for any machinery as part of your manufacturing process. Maybe it's detecting fraudulent behavior and security risks. And then Horizon 3, maybe if you're a healthcare organization, you want to start to predict which patients are at risk of cardiac arrest, and you're going to leverage some of that patient data from that perspective. Maybe you're building an interactive assistant that enables employees to share ideas. Lots of different things that you can do to start to do that, but at the foundational level, evolving your data estate to help support the different horizons as you move along throughout the Horizon framework is going to be essential to that success. It's really, there's no wrong place to start in all of these different areas. These are just suggestions. And if you think that you don't know where to start, you just have to start, right? Because your competitors are already starting. So you can think about things, maybe starting with a foundational use case, maybe one that is that operational focus. Start to establish trust in the organization. Maybe the organization, others in the organization are a little bit skeptical of AI, skeptical of whether it is can be trusted or whether it's going to be successful or worth the investment. You start with foundational, establish that trust, and move towards the transformational. And as you progress from Horizon 1 to Horizon 3, the more and more strategic those become, those models and those use cases become, the more custom models will probably be needed. Because if they were standard models and available to anyone in the industry, they can be duplicated easily. And to maintain a lasting competitive advantage, you want to make sure you're creating models that can't easily be duplicated. And so that's one of the key things to take away here. As you progress through to Horizon 3, you're also going to start uncovering new potential business models that may help drive new revenue streams and so on for your business. So one thing to know also is that AI requires us to evaluate outcomes differently. Traditionally, we've evaluated projects with maybe a net present value calculation or internal rate of return calculation. AI can introduce some unknowns, but all the unknowns aren't necessarily negative. Introducing new business models, introducing new revenue streams, these are all things that could really enable true transformation in your business. And I think understand there will be some upfront investment that needs to be made, whether it's in your data platform, whether it's in your skilling of your teams. All of these things are things to consider. But I think the key takeaway here is that it may not be traditional measurement that may be an indicator of success for AI projects. So that's just something to keep in mind as we move along. And so we've provided, I'm not going to drain this particular slide, but we've provided some examples. We'll be sure to leave the deck, make the deck available to you guys so that you can take it and process it offline. We do have some example value drivers and KPIs here for you to review and help measure those outcomes of those AI use cases that may be beneficial to you to help get you started. So now we're going to move into our next topic in our critical success factors, which is organizational readiness. Understanding where you are in your journey is extremely important. The Horizon-based framework allowed us to identify use cases. Do I choose door number 1 or door number 2 from a use case perspective, right? But once we've picked a use case, now we need to start making it real. And starting on this journey of executing this first use case, or subsequent use case, it's critical to understand where you are in this journey, because I think this will help you prioritize your activities and help you determine which activities we should start with first, right? And determine early on if we have a go or no go decision on whether or not we can execute on a particular use case that was identified. So I think this brings us to our next poll question. which is where do you think your company is on this maturity curve? Are you guys well on your way, or do you think you still have a ways to go? Perfect. We're getting a lot of responses in that most feel like they're either at that foundational or that approaching level. So that's great. Excellent. And as those continue to come in, I think we'll keep going here. And let's talk a little bit about after you know where you are on this maturity curve, now you can start to focus your efforts on building up your capabilities. And regardless of what those specific capabilities are, you always start with understanding your business drivers. If you're not executing these use cases or this buildup of skills in support of your value drivers or your cost drivers, then you may not be focused on the right things. And asking some key questions, which I have some examples of here, to help understand those business drivers is always a great place to start. Then make sure we go through and assess your current skill sets. Understanding what your teams are really good at is going to be critical, because then we'll need to identify those skill set gaps in terms of what is needed to execute these AI use cases successfully, and then determine a strategy for either how to train our in transition our existing staff to ramp up more on AI skill sets, hire new resources that may be able to help us, or partner with professional services firms or Microsoft to help drive this. Then as we continue down that path, we want to make sure that we are setting up an evaluation. How close are we becoming after we've invested in the necessary skills to make this happen? Make sure you establish guidelines for evaluation here. Maybe implement a coaching framework or a mentoring program, and make sure we share those wins and those successes with the organization, so that we can help recognize the great work that everyone is doing, and then make sure we retain that talent that is highly in demand. And we've partnered with a couple of academic medical centers from this perspective, and we really put this model into place to help build their skills over time and help. At first, we were helping accelerate their use cases while perpetually building up those skills. And then they were able to take that on and execute on subsequent use cases by themselves. We kind of use this metaphor of driving a car. When you're teaching someone how to drive, sometimes we're in the driver's seat and we can help identify a few key things on how to drive a car. In the next particular use case or phase, we may be in the passenger seat with our hand on the wheel every once in a while when we may be about to go into the ditch to correct that. And then eventually we're in the back seat or we're out of the car altogether, and our clients are running with those use cases independently. And so that's always been our philosophy from that perspective, and has worked very well over time. So as we kind of transition into, okay, we have a specific use case, we've built up some of our skills over time. Now, what does it mean? How can we start to execute on a particular use case? What is our team makeup that we need to be able to make this happen? Obviously, the first one is we want to make sure we have a leader of the use case, right, of the solution that we're going to build. Typically, this is a business champion, someone that can bridge the gap between the technical teams and the business teams. We need to make sure that we are always focused on making sure we are conducting that diligence with not only focused on the business value that we're driving towards, but also technically how feasible is it that we can make this happen. And you want to make sure you start small. Start with a small team, build on that success. And we've identified a couple of roles here that you can see, from not only a business champion, but having an AI engineer and a data engineer to make that happen. And not always is the business champion going to be the domain expert, but someone that can bridge the gap between those particular business areas and the technical teams as well. And one thing that I'll also just provide a plug for is Microsoft Learn as part of this, right? To help improve your technical readiness and you want to accelerate that, this is a free resource. And what's great about Microsoft Learn, Microsoft put a lot of investment in this, and our team and our clients have found this extremely valuable. So I've highlighted a few of the roles because they do have role-based career paths, or learning paths, I should say, that you could take advantage of depending on who you want to target for this. And I provide a link here as well to this page so you can get to this and then take advantage of all the free resources that are available to you. And I encourage you guys to check this out when you get a chance. All right, so this brings us to our next poll question. So which area do you feel like you have the biggest readiness gap? So whether it's the AI ready culture or use case identification or skilling, or maybe we need to invest in the data platform more. Would love to see what that looks like. We're getting a lot of all of the aboves. Excellent. Okay, so in our last critical success factor, this is focused on making sure that we emphasize how important the data foundation is, or the data estate, as part of this. So data is the fuel for AI models, and your AI models are only as good as the data that you provide. It's a best practice to position your data platform to be as close to those AI models where they're going to be executed to help maximize performance. And we've seen a lot of success with data lake architectures because they provide a lot of flexibility, not only for AI related use cases, but other business intelligence use cases, data engineering, and so on, even real-time analytics use cases as well. And so it's always good to pay attention to that. And don't underinvest in the data quality aspect, right? And governance aspect of your data platform, because this can really save you time and money longer term. You may have to endure a little pain to establish those best practices and those processes for make sure that data is cleansed and governed, but promoting that culture of data-driven decision making really hinges a lot on making sure those things are in place. So we're going to now transition to talking about security, privacy, and governance. And I'm actually going to bring Paul Huggins back in to talk a little bit about these pieces, specifically around the security and privacy related to AI.
Thanks, Jeff. So one of the big things that we hear a lot of the time is, I don't want my data getting exposed to the internet. I don't want somebody 2 months down the line to go and find all my code, to go and see everything I've put out there. And one of the big security pieces that we always try and reinforce and talk about is, through using the Azure, the Microsoft OpenAI service, all of that is handled for you. So from a big security standpoint, you can have confidence in all the facts that your data is not out there for other customers to see. It doesn't go back to OpenAI for them to retrain models on. It's not used to improve those models. It's not sold to third-party services or whatever that may be out there. And then it's not used really outside of your environment. Everything lives in your tenant, in your organization, in your area. And really the main slogan for all this is your data. What you put into this stays on your side. What you get out of this also stays on your side. And that's a really key thing. We talk about security for these AI models, is how that data is processed and talked back and forth with. The next one we're going to talk about briefly is governance around this. All organizations govern data. Most do it informally, inefficiently, or ineffectively, and all of us can do better at that. And part of this is the governance as a whole comes down to three main things. It's really people, processes, and technology all working together to achieve tangible business outcomes. And when we talk about this balance piece, it's really the balance of how we interact with each one of these areas in a responsible way that treats our data with the privacy and respect that it deserves, so that it can be handled appropriately, both upstream and downstream as we use it. And the Microsoft Cloud in this has a few tools that can help us with this. And I know we're going to talk mainly about AI governance in this. So on the next slide, we're going to talk briefly about what that looks like from an AI/ML standpoint. So there's two real flavors to AI governance. The first one being what's traditionally called ML ops. And that one is where you use traditional machine learning, and it's really a set framework of, we train a model, we validate that model, we deploy it, and then we monitor it. How we're seeing this change is a new evolution called AI ops, which is a lot more focused on this generative AI piece inside of this. And a part of this, there's really four key pillars. The first one starts with managing these models that come out. There's a dozen models out there that can all do the same task. They're all pretty competitive in that regard, but which ones can you use? Which ones should you use? What's the policy for how we use these new models on our data? How are they governed? What is the connection between everything? So really keeping in line, keeping our ear to the ground of how our models and how these new models that come out interact with what we put into them. The second one is designed around data governance and security. The governance policies that we have in place from a data standpoint need to flow through to here. We can't just turn off the governance when we get to the AI piece. Everything is in one relationship. Everything is governed by that one body. So what we keep on our data governance, we also need to keep through this as well to make sure that we're handling data responsibly as it flows through this. The third one is really designed around ethical and responsible AI. So explainability, transparency, and bias. All three are very critical in how we ensure customers and employees interact with these AI tools. How can we be sure that what they're using is held to the highest ethical and responsible standards? Microsoft has their 6 responsible AI standards that are out there. We attest to those as well. And a lot of the systems that we build and design have those at the framework of they are explainable, they are transparent of how we got here, and they treat everybody fairly in that regard. So we're reducing any bias that we can find in the systems. And then finally, from an AI ops standpoint, it's continuous monitoring. As rapid as technology changes, as quick as these new models come out, how can we be sure that what we're using is one, still the greatest, latest and greatest for what we're trying to do, but it also is monitored appropriately for how we are interacting with them, how our customers are interacting with them, and how can we track all of that to make sure that we're conforming to our broad governance as a whole. With that, pass it back off to Jeff.
Thanks, Paul. And so I think to enable this goal of pursuing this new model of value-based, high-quality, data-driven culture within your business, you want to make sure that you provide this right-sized governance strategy. It doesn't need to be too overly cumbersome so that it doesn't enable both technical teams and business teams to self-serve and be successful. You want to make sure that you do enough to curate and to govern these things so that the organization as a whole can be successful. So always making sure we focus on those critical business processes, assign your roles and responsibilities, move with agility and proper controls, not controls that we don't necessarily need. Make sure you create knowledge base and make it accessible to your business users, and then drive data quality. Make sure that these AI models, they need quality data to be successful. And so being able to make sure you put those activities in place and processes in place to enable that. Key things to enabling the right size governance strategy. All right. So in closing, we want to make sure that we hit on a couple of key points. I think first of all, leverage the horizon-based framework to identify those use cases and prioritize things, maybe through an AI ideation workshop or something like that. Start small, measure your wins, whether that's starting with a proof of concept, starting with a pilot. You can move from POC to pilot to production, showing that value all along the way. Understand where you are in your journey. You may need to do an assessment to figure out where you are in that journey and then create a roadmap for where you want to go. And I think that's something that is easily attainable and something that whether you do it yourself or you need some help doing that, we can certainly help with that. And then make sure you're ready for the journey, whether it's identifying those skills gaps, putting a skilling plan in place, or partnering with Microsoft or Lantern to be able to help you accelerate that process. That certainly is something that we can do. And build a strong foundation. Make sure your data platform is modernized and ready for this acceleration of AI use cases that your competitors are already in the midst of. And so it's upon you to make sure that you have that same sense of urgency to make that happen. And then I think finally, with Azure ML and OpenAI, be confident that your data is secure, right? And make sure that you weave in the right amount of governance to empower those users to facilitate that business-led self-service capabilities. Just like we've seen with business intelligence and BI and self-service reporting over time, we are going to start seeing a lot more business-led AI use cases as well. And I think putting this platform in place to make sure that you can enable that and it be governed in a way that keeps your organization secure is a great path forward. All right, so now we're going to transition to the Q&A portion of the discussion. Would love to take any questions that you may have. And so, Allison, I think if there are any in the chat that we have, we can start with those.
I have a question for you just to save typing. I appreciate that. A lot of the discussion we've had is for folks who are developing their own models based on their data and obviously developing the models within Azure. What are some pointers or best practices you have around, rather than developing our own models, dealing with vendors who are including AI and not so much necessarily generative AI, although I think that is coming in some cases, but some of the factors to consider as we're dealing with vendors who are incorporating AI into some of their products?
So I'll start and I'll let Paul chime in as well. The way that I would typically position that is along that spectrum that we talked about. So if it is a problem domain that is very common across the industry, then a buy decision may make more sense than a build decision. You start to move into your build decision when the models need to be customized more for your business, right? And so that those are things to consider from that perspective.
And I'm sorry, I guess to clarify, I wasn't speaking of buying a model. I'm speaking, for example, I work in healthcare, and Epic is the 500-pound gorilla in there for EMRs, electronic medical record systems, and they are incorporating AI into their product. So what are some recommendations you might have as far as factors to look out for from a governance perspective, or use case and type of recommendations as we're looking at those third-party products that are developing AI as part of their product, not so much looking at selling us models?
Perfect. Paul, do you want to chime in there?
Yeah, I think getting a good understanding of where those models are grounded from and what they're really being used for. We see a lot of that of this new AI chatbot came to this new software. Everyone goes nuts using it, but you really want to ask the questions of what are you doing with this data? How is it being used? Where is it going? What's being done behind the covers behind it? Because yeah, I think most companies now have that AI chatbot out to the side that pops up on you and wants to talk, and figuring out how that thing is designed from that governance standpoint are really kind of the key questions that I would be asking in that situation.
And Paul, you alluded to the grounding piece of that. Maybe you want to expand on that just a little bit.
Yeah, so knowing grounding in this term refers to what it is sourcing answers from in that sense of, are these models that they're putting in there, are they built on top of a robust knowledge base that we know is out there of all these medical records or whatever, all these medical documents, whatever that might be, right? Is it grounded in truth, or is it just hallucinating a little bit or bending the lines to give an answer back? So finding out what that was built on top of is what I referred to it there as grounding.
The other aspect too that you should consider is when we were discussing the horizon-based framework and plotting solutions and opportunities for your company to get value from AI, you can also plot your vendors in there, and you'll plot them in the horizon that you think best suits your company. But the thing to consider also is, for true competitive advantage, if you're going to get to that transformational state, using models that are industry wide and accessible to everybody in the industry is not going to give you the competitive advantage. It can help you with your operation effectiveness, engaging with customers. So it can fit a need for you in your horizons. But if you take a look at your whole portfolio of investments that you want to make in as a company, plot them in the proper horizon, and then continue work on custom models to drive true competitive advantage.
Thanks, guys.
Those are all great points. Thank you.
Yeah, we've got a couple more questions that have come into the chat. The first one is, do you have any use cases related to healthcare, specifically the insurance side of it, which can be shared with the group?
So we've got a lot of analytics use cases for sure. I'm not sure that we have any recent AI focused ones. I don't know if Ben and Paul, if you guys can recall any there on the payer side. I know we've got some on the provider side as well, but
Yeah, the provider side.
but yeah, so we can follow up with you on that and see if we can dig up some there.
Yep, the next one. What strategies would you recommend in helping software teams transition from pure software development to incorporating AI technologies?
Ooh, that's a good one. Paul, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can go first on it. That's a really good question. One that we've talked about internally as well with our teams of how do we help our teams get better at coding? How do we help them develop things faster? How do we accelerate some of these tools that we're working with? So making that transition from pure software development to incorporating AI technologies, there is one key things that comes to mind is breaking down the barriers of what it can do. I think myself coming from a coding background, I was very hesitant to accept and want the help from the AI systems. I was like, oh, I know more than that. I'm smarter than them. I don't need any of this stuff. I think kind of breaking down those barriers of what it can do and what it can't do is really beneficial in making that transition. And then also allowing it to not only help you write code from a software standpoint, but we've seen a lot of use for helping document, helping create unit test code for us to run all of these things through. So it's really a tool that we bring along the way with us to accelerate things down the line that we otherwise would have to write ourselves or go back and do ourselves with. So that's my 2 cents. Jeff, I'd love to hear yours on that as well.
Yeah, I think first off, don't be scared of taking advantage of things like GitHub Copilot, right? Allow your software developers to really see some of the statistics I've seen from Microsoft state that anywhere from 25 to 40% efficiency gains with GitHub Copilot, increasing the quality of code. One of the things that we have seen a big lift in is helping write unit test cases, right? And GitHub Copilot can do that, and it saves a ton of time from that perspective. But also, a lot of some of these, a lot of the things that we have seen with, especially with the Azure OpenAI service, is including AI search as part of line of business applications. And that really starts to blend the worlds of traditional software development and AI engineering together, right? And having your software developers up to speed on some of these different concepts that help drive some of that. Our software development teams and AI teams are working very closely in hand in those types of solutions, and we're seeing a lot of them pop up.
And Jeff, one more thing I'd add there too is professional software developers and organizations can also add a lot of value to the organization in building solutions quicker by using the Power Platform, so low code, and all the AI incorporated technologies within those tools too. So that's another great way to incorporate AI technologies in your development stack, in your roadmap as a company. So it's a great way to maybe modernize existing systems in the organization a lot quicker, and also make use of your core enterprise systems by building some custom apps on top of those to make data easily accessible to your employees across the organization too.
That's a great point.
Thanks, guys. Another question we have here, how best to approach senior leadership when they have a negative perspective on AI in general?
Ooh, that's a really good one. I think one of the ways to think about this is our competition is going to be experimenting with AI, looking at AI. And so is it just because there's negative press out there about AI and sometimes unfounded, right? That let's make sure that we get to the truth and work with our friends at Microsoft, if we're using Microsoft technologies, to make sure that you are putting in place all the right controls, all the right configurations to ensure security. That is number one. If there's a negative perception out there, typically it has to do with security. When people are using free things, free AI tools, not enterprise class AI tools, that typically means if anything's free, you're the product, right? And so it's always something to keep in mind. So when you have a solution that you are paying for that is an enterprise class solution or technology, you're going to have more security around that, more controls to be able to configure. And so to be able to establish that AI ready type of firm, you're seeing there's a lot of research out there, including what we talked about in terms of that Future Ready book, that these companies that are taking advantage of these capabilities are enjoying much higher margins, double-digit margins related to their peers in competition.
Great, thanks. Okay, we have two more questions that came in, both related to use cases. Any use cases we've encountered on the provider clinical side, then also use cases for the retail sector.
So on the provider clinical side, I'm going to let Paul weigh in just a little bit here, because most of our work recently has been around the tangential research related aspect from a provider and clinical side in some of the academic medical centers that we've worked with. Paul, you want to maybe just touch on that just a little bit?
Yeah, I can give the quick kind of 30-second overview on some of that stuff. So the big ones that we've worked with are really around designing enterprise AI architectures of how can we build these systems up that enable providers, clinicians, researchers, anyone in between to access and work with these AI tools, connected, grounded on their data, connected to high governance standards, working with all your things you would expect from a privacy standpoint for HIPAA and SOC 3 and all those things. How really designing those systems that their teams can use that is really the main one that comes to mind when we talk about the provider and clinical side of that.
Perfect. On the retail sector, Ben, you want to maybe chime in here a little bit on some of the AI use cases that you've been involved with some of our retail and CPG customers?
Yeah, be happy to. One of the, I guess, more transformational use cases that we did was being able to predict the effectiveness of marketing campaigns before you run them. And so we were able to incorporate data from more than 500,000 retail locations for our customer, incorporating data across nearly every single US household in the country, and then also the propensity for their customers to purchase certain products. And using AI to bring that all together, the marketing team, in a self-sufficient manner with a web application that we built for them, they were able to drag and drop all these different variables together that they were wanting to test for a campaign to see the likelihood that that campaign would be successful before making the investments in doing that campaign. The results for them were the very first campaign that they ran using this new internal web application is responsible for 80% of the sales of that product in the first 2 weeks of launch for that. That's one case study from the retail sector. But the exercise that I always ask people to do in the slide where Jeff was talking about the pillars of digital transformation and the 4 pillars, if you just take a step back and just start listing things across each of those 4 pillars that your company is doing in there, you can make a pretty good use case of how AI can help you do that either better or cheaper or quicker and improve the capabilities of the organization. But yeah, in the future, we'll be sending an email out to everybody following up from this webinar. But feel free to ask questions, schedule a meeting with us to discuss more use cases that might be more specific to your needs.
First of all, really appreciate everyone joining, taking time out of their day to listen to this webinar. Lee, do you want to close out and bring us home?
Thank you so much, everybody, for attending. And as you're starting to identify use cases, Lantern can help you with an ideation session to identify the use case that will have the most impact and also help through that process of doing a POC and pilot and developing that culture. Please reach out to your account team. We can help answer many of the questions that you have. So thanks very much, everybody.